Welcome to Stoic and Still, where deep minds find peace and silent strength becomes your power. There comes a time in your life when comfort no longer feels comforting, when routines that once made you feel safe now make you feel trapped. And it doesn't happen in a sudden explosion. It starts quietly, like a whisper in the background of your everyday life, softly but persistently asking, "Is this all there is?" That whisper grows, not in volume, but in clarity, until it becomes impossible to ignore. You begin to feel a restlessness, not the kind that urges you to run away, but the kind that calls you to rise, to expand, to become. And even if you can't yet name what you're becoming, you know that the person you've been is no longer enough. Something within you is reaching for more. Not more achievements, not more validation, but more depth, more truth, more wholeness. This desire to evolve doesn't come from a place of dissatisfaction. It comes from a sacred knowing that you were made for something greater. You're no longer satisfied with repeating cycles. You want growth that feels real, change that feels earned. You're not interested in superficial improvement. You want transformation. Not the kind that changes how you look, but the kind that changes how you live, how you love, how you meet the world each morning. And this longing shows up in small, unexpected ways. You find yourself drawn to new ideas, new books, new teachers, not because someone told you to seek them, but because your soul is hungry. Hungry to remember what it came here for. Have you ever felt that pull? That invisible thread tugging at your heart, guiding you towards something unfamiliar yet irresistibly important. A sudden desire to learn, to heal, to understand the parts of yourself you've long ignored. If so, you're not broken. You're blooming. You're in the earliest stages of transformation, where nothing outside you has changed, but everything inside you has shifted. And this shift changes everything. You begin to crave meaning over noise, solitude over distraction, growth over comfort. You find yourself examining not just what you do, but why you do it. Your choices begin to carry more weight, not because you're afraid of mistakes, but because you finally understand the value of alignment. And yes, it's not always easy. Growth demands the death of what's outdated. It requires the courage to let go of identities that no longer reflect who you truly are. You may grieve the parts of yourself that once felt so familiar. You may feel the ache of saying goodbye to relationships, environments, or habits that once defined you. But this pain is not punishment. It is proof. Proof that you are alive. Proof that you are changing. Proof that you are brave enough to honor the call to become. This inner evolution often leads you to unexpected places. You begin to reflect more. You may start journaling, meditating, walking in silence, not because someone told you to, but because you're naturally gravitating towards spaces where your inner voice can breathe. You begin to choose discomfort when you know it leads to growth. You choose presence over avoidance. You choose your future self over your past habits. And each of those choices, though small, compounds into something powerful, something sacred. You may also find yourself reevaluating the way you speak to yourself. The harsh inner critic that once ruled your thoughts begins to soften. You start speaking with compassion. You start offering yourself grace. Because deep down, you realize that healing isn't about fixing, it's about remembering. Remembering that you were never broken, that you were simply layered under years of survival, conditioning, and self-doubt. And now, you're peeling those layers away, not to become someone new, but to return to who you've always been beneath it all. Have you felt that quiet rebirth lately? That strange blend of sadness and excitement, of letting go and leaning in? If so, write about it. Let others know they're not alone. This process can be messy, it can be confusing, but it is also the most honest, most empowering, most necessary journey you will ever take. You are not just growing, you are becoming. And what you're becoming is not someone else's ideal, not society's version of success, but the most intimate, liberated version of you. And as this desire to evolve deepens, you begin to see life differently. Challenges no longer feel like obstacles, they feel like invitations. Failure no longer feels like shame, it feels like feedback. You no longer fear the unknown, you begin to trust it. You begin to trust yourself. Not because you have all the answers, but because you're finally asking the right questions. Questions like, who am I when no one is watching? What brings me alive? What am I willing to release in order to rise? This is evolution, not as a destination, but as a daily choice. The choice to show up, the choice to stay awake, the choice to grow even when it hurts. And each time you say yes to that growth. Thank you for being here and for listening this far. If this message speaks to something inside you and you'd like to walk further on this path together, please consider subscribing to Stoic and Still. Your presence here means more than words can say. There was something almost holy in the way she loved him, as if her heart recognized something ancient in his presence, not just a man, but a memory, a longing, an echo of a life she might have lived in another time. She would look at him not with the eyes of someone who needed to be loved back, but with the eyes of someone who simply wanted to give love, like sunlight on a window pane, not needing to be held, only to be seen. She didn't write him poems, but her thoughts were sonnets. Every time he smiled, she memorized it like a stanza. Every time he walked away without noticing the sadness in her eyes, she folded it like a quiet line of verse no one would ever read. Her love was written in the pauses between their conversations, in the breath she held when she hoped he'd finally ask, "Are you okay?" But he never did. And so she gave up asking for more, not because she stopped wanting it, but because she learned that asking him to see her was like whispering to a storm. The winds too loud, the thunder too proud, the silence afterward too cruel. Instead, she began to hold her own hand in the dark, to rock her own heart when it cried at night, to become the place she once hoped he would be. Have you ever loved someone so much that you had to become the very thing you were begging them to give? It's a strange, bittersweet kind of power, when you realize that the love you gave away freely is the same love you must now give to yourself, not as a second option, but as the only real salvation. And yet, even after all the tears she never let fall in front of him, all the moments she bit her tongue so he could feel like a man, even after all the times she celebrated his wins without ever asking him to see her losses, she never hated him. She couldn't. Because some hearts are carved from softness so profound they keep loving even when bruised, even when bent, even when broken. She wasn't naive. She saw it all. The way he leaned toward her when he needed comfort and away from her when she needed the same. The way he'd vanish when things got heavy, only to return when the skies were clear again. The way he loved her convenience, but not her chaos. And still, she stayed for a time. Why do we do that? Why do we linger in places that don't nourish us, hoping one day the soil will change beneath our feet? Is it faith? Is it fear? Is it the childhood ache of wanting to be chosen, this time, finally, by someone who reminds us of the first person who didn't? If you're still reading this, if you felt that tightness in your chest, that longing to be seen, not just for your beauty, your body, or your usefulness, but for the ache and the art and the wild sacredness inside you, then maybe it's time to ask yourself a question that changes everything. What if the love you've been begging for was never meant to come from him? What if he was only ever meant to be the mirror, the one that showed you all the places inside you still unloved, still unseen, still afraid of their own power? What if he came into your life not to be your home, but but to shake your foundation so fiercely that you'd finally remember you were the one who built the house in the first place. There is something deeply humbling about realizing the person you longed for was never capable of holding the depth of what you carry. It doesn't mean they were cruel. It doesn't even mean they were wrong. Sometimes people love in the only way they know how, even if that love falls short of what your soul truly needs. And that's the moment you face the hardest truth of all, that you can't teach someone to meet you in a place they've never visited within themselves. She once believed that if she just stayed a little longer, bent a little softer, asked for less, and gave a little more, maybe one day he would look at her and finally see the quiet universe she was holding behind her smile. But the longer she waited, the more she realized she wasn't becoming lighter, she was disappearing, piece by piece, smile by smile, until one day she stood in front of the mirror and didn't recognize the reflection, not because she was broken, but because she had been edited by silence, by dismissal, by the 1,000 tiny ways he never said, "I see you." Have you ever watched yourself vanish in the name of love? It's subtle, isn't it? It doesn't happen all at once. It begins when you swallow the first thing you wanted to say, when you convince yourself your needs are too much, when you explain away your intuition, call it insecurity, and tell yourself he didn't mean it like that. And then, before you know it, you're smiling in rooms that make you ache, staying in conversations that drain your spirit, making yourself smaller just to keep the peace in a war that's only happening inside you. But here's what no one tells you. Love is not the art of disappearing. It is not the willingness to abandon yourself so someone else can feel whole. She came to understand that real love, the kind that heals, that ignites, that expands, doesn't ask you to be quiet when your soul wants to roar. It doesn't punish your emotions or mock your sensitivity. It doesn't make you question your worth every time you speak your truth. Real love says, "I see you, even in your chaos, especially in your chaos." And if no one has ever said that to you, then let this moment be the first time it's spoken. You are not too much. You are not hard to love. You are simply asking for the kind of love that doesn't settle for half light. So tell me, where in your life have you mistaken attention for affection? Where have you confused being needed with being cherished? And what part of you still believes you have to earn love by becoming someone quieter, easier, smaller? Somewhere along the way, she stopped waiting for an apology that was never going to come. She stopped rehearsing conversations in her head, imagining the day he'd finally say the words she longed to hear. And in that quiet surrender, she found something more precious than closure. She found clarity. Clarity that the love she gave was never wasted, even if it wasn't returned. That just because he didn't see her value doesn't mean it wasn't there. That the way he mishandled her heart says more about where he is in his journey than about where she stands in hers. And most of all, clarity that not everyone you love is meant to love you the way you need. Some people enter your life only to show you the contrast. So, you'll never again settle for the absence of presence, for the noise of silence, for the ache of almost. She had to learn, sometimes painfully, that being strong isn't about holding on. It's about knowing when to let go. Not out of bitterness, but out of deep, tender reverence for her own spirit. So she began to unlearn the way she always overextended, to unlearn the way she clung to potential instead of truth, to unlearn the habit of shrinking herself for the comfort of others. And in that unraveling, she didn't fall apart. She came home, not to him, to herself, to the woman she was before the world told her she had to be quiet to be loved, to the girl who once believed in fairy tales and now writes her own ending, to the soul who finally understood that heartbreak isn't the end, it's the doorway. Because sometimes it takes losing the one you thought you couldn't live without to meet the one who's been waiting for you all along. The you that's wild, whole, untamed, and unapologetically luminous. And maybe that's why this happened. Not to break her, not to punish her, but to awaken her, to shake her from the illusion that love meant sacrifice, silence, or settling, to remind her that the love she was always seeking wasn't out there, it was within. So now, she walks differently. She speaks with softness, but no longer with apology. She smiles without reaching for anyone's validation. Her love is still deep, still generous, still radiant, but now it has roots, boundaries, wisdom, fire, and maybe one day he'll remember her. He'll hear a song she loved. He'll see someone who looks like her across a crowded room, and he'll wonder what would have happened if he had stayed, if he had tried, if he had seen. But by then, she'll be long gone, not in bitterness, but in bloom. And if he ever comes back, he won't find the same girl waiting. He'll find a woman who knows her worth, who loves deeply, but never begs, who listens to her intuition louder than anyone else's opinion, and who no longer needs him to write her story, because she became the author the day she chose herself. So tell me, have you ever mistaken longing for loyalty? Have you stayed in a place just because you loved someone, even when that place no longer loved you back? And if you had to choose today between being chosen and choosing yourself, would you finally pick you? She no longer waits by the door. She no longer checks her phone hoping his name appears. She no longer wonders if she could have said it better, loved him more, or held on longer, because now she understands. The right love does not require you to lose yourself in order to be seen. It does not come through absence, confusion, or chaos. It arrives with presence, with peace, with a knowing that does not shake when storms arrive. She has made peace with the fact that not all great loves are meant to last. Some are meant to awaken, to burn, to carve out all that is false, so only truth remains. And in her truth, she discovered something extraordinary, that being alone is not the same as being lonely. That solitude can be sacred, that her worth isn't measured by someone staying. It's measured by the courage it takes to stand alone and still feel whole. You see, the greatest love story of her life was never about him. It was always about her, about the moment she stopped searching for someone to choose her, and finally chose herself. And when she did, the world changed. Not because the pain disappeared, but because she stopped running from it. She sat with it, held it, let it teach her, let it strip her bare, and then she rose from it, softer but stronger, quieter but more certain, open but guarded by wisdom. She became the kind of woman whose presence speaks before she does. The kind of woman who doesn't need validation to know she's valuable. The kind of woman who doesn't chase love because she knows that real love doesn't need convincing. It simply stays. So now, if someone asks her, "Do you still love him?" she smiles.